Hi, everybody. I am Beth Concepcion. I am the assistant provost, and I work on strategic engagement for the Hammock School of Business. I also teach in the communications department. I teach public speaking and media studies. And I met Keith Pepper recently at a Brookhaven Chamber of Commerce meeting, and I thought that the things he talked about would be fantastic for students to hear. He acquired Springs Publishing in December of last year, right in the heart of the pandemic. But he has deep roots in the Atlanta community and more than 20 years working at local and global media organizations. His first job when he was 16 was at WSB Radio, where he worked through high school and also college. And I'm so excited that he's here today to speak to you all about why he chose to take on publishing a newspaper in this climate and how it's going for him. So Keith, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. And I love the chance to speak to as many people as possible about what we're doing, but especially to a class and students from Oglethorpe, because I grew up not too far from where you guys, where your campus is. So it's so interesting to be on a Zoom. This is my first sort of academic Zoom. I've been hearing a lot about it and watching my nieces and nephews do class from their laptops and kitchen tables over the past year. So it's cool to be here with you guys, but I know you all want to get back to class, and hopefully we'll be getting back in person very soon. And one of the perks of Zoom and perks of technology is that I'm actually doing this from the beach. So this is why I look a little like I just came from the beach. It's because I did. But when you own your own business and it's 2021 and you have Zoom, you can do fun things like this. So they probably don't teach a course on it. And in fact, just hearing you guys and knowing what you're going through in school, it reminds me frequently, and I have to tell people this, they're always amazed, but I think I was the last class at the University of Georgia that didn't have email when we were in college. So I graduated without ever having email as a student. So it's pretty amazing where we are. I'm just going to share my screen here and go into this mode. Does that work, Beth?
Yeah, we're all set. You look great.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so cool. So thanks you guys for having me and organizing this. So I'm the publisher and the owner of what's called Springs Publishing. We are a hyperlocal media organization based in Atlanta. So we publish, every month we publish 6 monthly newspapers, and we still do those in print. The newspapers that we have, 5 of them are geographic, and one of them is what we call vertical, that goes to a specific niche sort of industry, which I'll talk about in a second. But we have the reporter newspapers, which hopefully you guys may have seen in and around campus. So we have Dunwoody, we have Buckhead, Sandy Springs, and of course, Brookhaven. We also publish a newspaper called Atlanta in Town, which covers basically from like the Amtrak station on Peachtree Street south through Grant Park, if you're familiar with that area. And then from Emory University on the east side over to the west side, which continues to sort of expand into the West End and that sort of area. And then Atlanta Senior Life is the publication that we have, which is targeted to Atlanta's senior community. And so that is distributed to retirement homes, independent living homes, community centers around the metro Atlanta area. Of course, we don't just do newspapers. We also have websites where all of our content is updated multiple times a day on our websites, and then social media continuing to be a big area that we engage with folks. And then all of our content is also available on via email newsletters. And I'm going to talk a lot about the industry that we're in, the publishing industry, the media industry, the transformation that it's undergoing. But I'm also going to try and weave in as much as I can to make it relevant to you guys around, the digital evolution of how we're presenting content as well. And to that point, about 3 months ago, we launched a new email product. It's really a new brand that we launched, which is called Rough Draft Atlanta. And this is a 3 times a week morning email, really much in the spirit of, you guys may know the Skim or the Cram or the Morning Brew. So this is a sort of an email first product where we have a little bit of personality, It's a different brand than our other brands, and we distribute that Monday, Wednesday, and Friday morning, 7 a.m. It's in your inbox. It's about 5 to 7 stories on those days, and it takes you probably less than 4 minutes to read. So I'll give another plug for that at the end if you want to sign up, which I hope you will. The address is roughdraftatlanta.com, and you can enter your email. And the next one will be in your inbox tomorrow morning at 7. Our goal is to distribute relevant, and this is important to me personally, non-sensational news to the communities that we cover. We also really strive to give local and more regional businesses sensible and efficient ways to connect to their target audiences. And that's important because right now, and I will come back to this multiple times during the conversation, our business model is 100% ad supported. So the way that we make money is that we get advertisers to put their message into our products, whether that's a print ad, an email newsletter ad, a web ad, and then we distribute our content for free to the communities that we cover. So the advertisers that you'll see in our paper are folks that you guys hopefully support around Brookhaven. So there's a lot of retailers in town, Brookhaven, a lot of real estate advertisers, a lot of specialty medical folks. Restaurants are coming back. They definitely took a big hit during the pandemic. And events are also a nice source of advertising base for us. But those, of course, have been really decimated. Although, as you saw on the cover story to our Atlanta in-town product this month, this is the April, what month are we in? This is the May issue that actually is on the newsstands and in the mail now. And, the arts are really coming back. And so we're seeing a lot of our local arts organizations adapt to coming back. Every month we distribute about 100,000 newspapers in print. We do this through direct mail. So we mail at pretty big expense every month. We mail the newspapers into single family homes in the communities that we cover. So you can see the distribution numbers here. And then we also supplement the mailing with what we call drops at local businesses, cafes, restaurants, community centers, dry cleaners, just all sorts of places like that. And one of the things that differentiates us from our competitors, and one of the reasons that we're still getting a lot of print advertising is because we're also super high quality. So if we were in person, I would be handing out copies of the paper, and you could see the high quality print that we distribute. So that's important because it's not something that's sitting on someone's driveway wilting away in the rain. It gets taken into homes. It gets just shared, sits on coffee tables, gets taken around. So that's a real value to our readers because it's an enjoyable sort of magazine type experience to read, but it's also really important to our advertisers. And then the other thing that sets us apart is that we are laser focused on covering hyperlocal news for the communities that we cover. And so it's important that the areas that we cover are, they're towns and they're cities, more importantly. So Brookhaven is a city. There's a mayor, there's a city council, there's a police force, same in Sandy Springs, same in Dunwoody, obviously Atlanta as well. But for Dunwoody, Brookhaven, and Sandy Springs in particular, there's no one else that's really committed to covering the city government as much as we are. And so that's a super important thing. And I'll talk about that as we go along, about how the reception has been from the different governments about what we do. Any questions or so far? Since I'd love to hear you guys chime in, or I guess Beth, you'll tell me if there's chats that come in when you're monitoring that. So
right, if anybody has questions, you can drop them in the chat right now, and then we can
that'd be great.
Bring up.
It's the one thing that's Zoom's great because I can walk off the beach and be here, but it's terrible because you can't always see everyone's reaction. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story and how I got here, and how it's pretty unpredictable. If you want people to think to look at you like you have two heads, tell them that you're buying a newspaper company in 2020. Then tell them you're buying 6 newspapers and tell me how that goes over. But so just a little bit about me. I was born and raised in Atlanta. As I mentioned, I grew up running around the area right around Brookhaven, right around Oglethorpe rather, in Brookhaven. I was born at Northside Hospital. My parents both, basically came of age in Atlanta. My dad grew up here his entire life. My mom moved here from New York. So we have a real connection, a real deep connection to Atlanta and to the community. And that's you'll see when I come back to it later in the story, that's a big part of what got me to where I want to be. When we announced that I was buying the papers, the AJC wrote, it was actually a very fair, very funny story about it, because the newspaper industry loves nothing more than writing about themselves, and the media industry loves nothing more than writing about themselves. But the columnist Bill Torpy, who I've now since become friendly with, basically called me a nut in the AJC, which was very fun, but very fun and funny. And like I said, we've become sort of friendly after that. So growing up in Atlanta, I grew up in a family that will be, this will be kind of crazy to most of you on the call. We got 3 newspapers every morning. So every morning, 7 days, or I guess 5 days a week, we got 3, and on the weekends we probably got 1 or 2. We would walk to the end of the driveway, we would pick up the newspapers, and we would sit around the breakfast table flipping through them. And that was how you got your news. That's what we did. Back in those days, Atlanta had 2 papers. We had a morning paper and we had an afternoon paper. So we got 3 in the morning, and then at some point in high school, I decided that wasn't enough. So I spent my own money. I started working at a young age. I spent my own money and subscribed to the afternoon paper. So then we got 4 newspapers a day in the house. So you can really understand how popular I was in high school, how cool I was getting subscribing to the afternoon newspaper. So I'll fast forward. I went to the University of Georgia. There's my parents. I grew up in Atlanta. There's me as a kid with the pepper t-shirts that they forced us to wear. After a while, I went to New York. So I traced my family roots. I left Atlanta. I felt like I really needed to get out and to see other parts of the world. And so I, followed my mom's family roots back to New York, and really felt amazingly comfortable. Like I had sort of arrived. I got to work in really cool industries. I got to eat at some of the best restaurants. I got to go to really cool shows, just do really fun things. And I absolutely loved it. And New York felt like home until it didn't. I mean, basically the way I describe it is a switch flipped, and New York suddenly lost all of its appeal. I don't know if it was the snow, a couple of really bad winters, or if it was the day after the snow, when the snow melts and you have to sort of walk through a lot of puddles to get to work. But New York suddenly lost all its charm. And while this was happening, this was after almost 20 years. So it's been a lot of time there, but I never lost my connections to Atlanta, and Atlanta kept getting more and more interesting. So New York to me got less interesting, and Atlanta got more interesting. So I kept spending more time here and feeling this gravitational pull back to Atlanta. I actually joined, even when I wasn't living here, I joined a couple of nonprofits. I got more and more involved in local regional politics. So doing stuff. And then I took a big plunge, and I got a place to live in Atlanta, and I basically commuted between New York and Atlanta for about 18 months. So I would get on a plane late Sunday night. I would fly to New York. I would sleep in just a bedroom that I had rented that wasn't really much more than a nice room in someone's place. And then I would fly back to Atlanta on Thursday night, work from home on Friday, and do it, and then spend the weekends here, and just really, really connecting back with the city and with friends and with my family here. So, again, just giving you guys the broad strokes, but in 2019, I decided I had had enough. And after 18 months of doing that commute, I, gracefully left the job I was in, and I decided I was going to be in Atlanta full time. So I got a place, I got a dog. That's my dog. She did not make the trip to the beach, which I'm bummed about, but that's her. I got a place on the Beltline. That's my sunset view. And suddenly I was super engaged in the Atlanta community. And I was really, really happy to be here. And I started looking for something to do full time. I was doing some consulting. I'd been really lucky with some opportunities that had worked out where I'd had the chance to work on some really fun projects. But then I wanted to do more, and I wanted to get engaged both civically in the community, but also, corporately, and finding something that was engaging to me to do as a business. So that's when I met Steve Levine, who had founded the newspaper company that we're talking about. And we really hit it off when we met. We had some shared life experiences. We both had a shared sense of how to build a business, of what it meant to be a community newspaper, and really to build a meaningful business, which was important to both of us. We of course want to build something that's sustainable and profitable, but it was also important to me and to Steve that the business be, engaged in the community. So that was in January of 2020. So I don't have to tell you what happened in a couple months later, as we sort of had this flirtation and started sniffing around each other to look at, was this something that I was going to be able to do? Then COVID happened and everything came to a screeching halt. I was, quite frankly, I was a little bit freaked out, like a lot of people were, what was going to happen. So the last thing I thought I needed to be doing was to buy a business at that time. So anyway, we stayed in touch through the early days of COVID. Steve's business was able to maintain itself through much of 2020. I won't tell you things grew a lot in 2020 through COVID, but they were able to maintain and to make smart decisions and continue through that period. And so we kept talking, and I kept seeing, every time I looked at it, I kept seeing a really well-run small business with a good brand reputation in the community. And also I saw that there were a lot of opportunities for me to make changes and bring it up to, to be a little bit more modern, because I also knew the macroeconomics of the media industry. So for those of you that are communication students, or just any of you that even have read any of the news, know that the macroeconomics of the newspaper industry are crazy. Like, you got to literally be nuts to go into it, because we'll talk about in a second, like, newspapers are closing, really, really fast. And so, knowing all this, I sat down with a lot of friends who knew me rather, and I asked them to talk me out of this. I said, here's the numbers, here's the business, tell me that I'm crazy and tell me that I should not be doing this. And to a person, none of them did. They all knew my experience. They all knew my passion. They all, saw the numbers, and they wouldn't do it. They wouldn't talk me out of it. So, people that knew me for 4 decades and people that knew me for 4 months, heard the story, and they all to a person said, you got to do it. So by October of last year, we had reached a deal. And then by the end of the year, as Beth said, we closed on it in December of 2020. So by then I was suddenly jumping out of bed every morning as a newspaper publisher and owning this company, and also as a first-time business owner, because I hadn't owned my own business before. So it was a lot going on around that time. So it was very exciting. But as someone said to me at the time, like, the only way that newspapers were surviving was by publishing stories about newspapers failing. And so that brings me to, to the media landscape. So, I'm not going to get into politics. If you guys want to stay on later, we can do that. Or we can go to a outdoor bar and talk politics, but, I'm not going to say that, we're not going to get into that now, but, you guys know how divided the country is. And I don't know whether the division is a symptom of the current media landscape or the cause of it, but that's something that we can talk about. But we do know, we know for certain that that house that I described growing up in, getting 3 newspapers in the morning and another newspaper in the afternoon, like, that does not exist. So that no longer, feel free to chime in on the Zoom reaction button if your household gets 4 newspapers. But that is just, things are just different. And so whether that's good or bad isn't for me to say, but it's just different. So during that whole transformation of these, of that media landscape, the daily newspaper industry has really taken the brunt of this, of those changes. And so the economics have completely fallen apart for the newspaper industry. As people have fled to read content on digital. So these are just some stats. There's a book called Ghosting the News, which is a very quick, for any communication students on the call, for anyone interested in the media industry, it's worth a read. It's a real quick read, but Margaret Sullivan is what's called a public editor at the Washington Post, and she's one of the smartest people who writes about the newspaper industry. And just some stats, since 2004, more than 2,000 daily newspapers have closed. Almost half of newsroom jobs have been cut. Fewer than 1 in 6 people. So that means that less than 2 people on this call probably pay for news. Subscribe to a paper versus getting it for free on Twitter or Instagram or some free content sites. And then also around the country, there are what's called news deserts. Hundreds of news deserts where you have cities and towns and areas and large swaths of the country that don't have any local media. So they don't have anyone covering their local government. They don't have anyone talking to them about or informing them about what's happening with their school board, with their police force, with their city government. So this is not a great dynamic for civics, not a great dynamic for a society. Whether you're whatever side of the political spectrum you are, these are generally not great dynamics. And so I call them like least common denominator digital sites, and I've worked in the industry for long enough to know that these places have their place. These types of sites have their place. They actually make a ton of money. We call them clickbait sites, or the celebrity news sites. You never believe what this teenage star looks like. Those sorts of things. So those also kind of became the new normal. So it's kind of people just started getting their news from there. So this weird juxtaposition happened, which was that suddenly we have more and more ways than ever to get information, but we're ironically more and more isolated than ever before into our own echo chambers, right? We only hear what we want to hear, or city government isn't covered. And so when I bought the papers, a city councilman from Sandy Springs called me, and this was a quote he said to me, that he was so happy that someone locally was buying the papers and they were going to continue, because he says, hey, if you're a local politician, and you're going to consider doing something that may or may not be ethically sound, the thing that you consider is, if I do this, will I end up on the front page of the paper? And if there's not a paper to end up on the front page of, then you're probably more likely to act without considering the consequences. And so that made me feel really good about what we're doing, and the reception continues to be good. And there's also the piece where if politicians don't complain about what you're doing occasionally, you're probably not doing the right thing. And I can tell you all that plenty of politicians already have called me complaining about what we do. So it makes me feel like we're at least people are reading us. So that's the most important thing. And the other element too is that a lot of even the newspapers that survived. So if you remember this stat, where 2,000 papers have closed, even the ones that have survived are owned now by big finance companies or publicly traded companies that are based in cities far away. I'm not going to disparage New York, but maybe they're based in New York. So someone's making programming decisions about Atlanta, and they don't even live here. And you see this a lot if you follow local news. If you follow Atlanta stories, even in places that I pay for and I revere, like the New York Times or the Washington Post. You'll see a big story happen in Atlanta, and they'll talk about what's happening. And they'll get the towns totally wrong. They'll get in New York, in Brooklyn, there's a street called DeKalb Avenue. It's spelled the exact same as DeKalb County, but it's pronounced completely different. There's just little things you just know these people aren't from Atlanta. You saw it. Unfortunately, it's a horrible example, but you saw it in the recent shootings, in the recent spa shootings. That they were misplacing the names of the towns, and so this is why local matters. This is why it's important to keep advertising dollars local. It's important for decisions to be made locally. Right now, 0 of Atlanta's top 4 TV stations are owned by local companies. I mean, Cox used to own Channel 2, but they sold it to private equities. And now it's based, now it's owned by a New York company. And so it's, I think that's why local really matters. And I think it's really exciting, and we keep hearing about it. And you guys, you might know, like all that bad stuff that I'm talking about in terms of the trends around mass media, national media, it's a little bit different for local media. So you'll see, you see companies like Nextdoor, if you're familiar with that, which is like a super hyperlocal news site or information site or social media site, doing really well because they're providing, information for the neighborhoods that people really care about. Any questions so far, or Beth, keep going on? Or
no, actually there is a question. So I want to introduce you to Dr. Osima Shrikande, who has been at Oglethorpe for, correct me if I'm wrong, I want to say 18 years. Is that correct, Dr. Shrikande?
That is very accurate. Yes.
I got it right. Great. And she was program coordinator for communications until very recently. And she has an excellent question about advertisers. She'd like to know if you feel pressure, either overt or implicit, from advertisers about content you want to cover.
So far, I know this dynamic exists, but so far we haven't had it. But it's an interesting change in the industry now that, and one of the things I wanted to talk about was sort of the business model changes. And so one of the areas that continues to grow is what's called sponsored content or native advertising, where there may be an article about, I don't know, pet care or senior living, and that article may be sponsored by or contributed by a company that has an interest in that. And so, or advertorial is the term that a lot of people use. So the short answer is no, we have not heard that. I've gotten more pressure from politicians about what we cover than I have from advertisers. But I know it exists. We actually recently wrote a story about a new entertainment complex that's opening in town Atlanta called the Illuminarium. And the CEO, my phone rang the next day and it was the CEO calling, and my heart sort of stopped for a second. And he said, I'm just calling, I want to tell you that the story you guys wrote was the most accurate and the most thorough about what we're doing. And again, not to disparage other people, because you'll hear me say later, like I need there to be a healthy ecosystem, but the other people got it wrong, and they wrote some stuff that was factually incorrect. And so it was an interesting case of an advertiser calling to tell me that they appreciated what we were doing, but I haven't had anyone try to influence it. Does that answer your question?
Thank you so much.
No, thank you.
Thank you. And then if anyone else has any questions, just drop them in the chat, and then when Keith asks for them, I can ask them.
I'll talk about talk about the company and where we're going. Springs Publishing, again, we publish 6 papers every month. We were founded in 2007, actually 2006, and the first paper was in 2007. This is the masthead or the flag of the first paper. Started in Sandy Springs, and then Buckhead said, hey, wait a second, we want to be part of this as well. So we launched the Sandy Springs Reporter and the Buckhead Reporter. And then in 2009, Brookhaven was launched as it began to expand and look into cityhood. In 2013, Steve acquired Atlanta In Town. So we grew a little bit by acquisition. And then in about 5 years ago, in 2016, they added Atlanta Senior Life, which extended the base. Atlanta Senior Life is not as geographically targeted, so it goes to kind of the wider metro area. So I think of what we cover and how we approach our, engagement with content, or our distribution of content, into two buckets. One of the buckets is what I call the content that readers need. And so this is like local government that we talked about, education, and public safety. So, there's still an element, even though we try not to be sensational, there's still an element of public safety and crime and police news that we do cover. Actually, I will, someone recently tried to get me to sponsor a police award, and I told them that we couldn't do that. And I hope they understood that we need to be able to independently investigate the police. And they looked at me like like the two-head look of like, what are you talking about? So there is some of that, but we've been able to sort of steer clear of it. And then the other bucket that I talk about or think about is sort of the content that readers crave, right? So arts and culture, which is coming back, dining. People love dining news. People love to read about what restaurants are opening. Unfortunately, they also like to read about what restaurants are closing. And then real estate. Real estate is something that people love to sort of be voyeuristic about. They love to look at other people's homes. They'd love to see what other people pay for their homes. I was talking to someone about this the other day, and it's the only thing in the US real estate it's the only thing that is socially acceptable to ask someone else what they pay. You can't ask someone else what they make, but you can. It's for some reason it's okay to ask them what they paid for their house. It's sort of a weird cultural quirk, I guess, because it's all public information. So, so that's the way I think about the content that we provide people. And we're constantly competing for audience attention. I'm not going to put anyone on the spot on this call, but a lot of when I talk to folks that are in school or people that are younger than me, where do you get your news? And so much of the time, the answer is social media, is Instagram. And so I realize that that's what we're dealing with. That's what we're sort of competing against, if you will, because the spotlight is on us to provide engaging content. And so some of the ways that we've been changing, this as we look at it is trying to make, working towards making the content that we have more compelling. So these are two things that I'm excited about that we've recently started. Just as a quick example for you, this is on the left-hand side, you see is a quick sort of whimsical Q&A that we did with a chef. I don't know if you guys know who Natalie is, but she's has a business called Chinese Southern Belle. So we do a quick whimsical Q&A with her, and then that QR code, or sort of whatever that code thing is, and Spotify if you scan that, it goes to a Spotify playlist that she contributed to us. And so we're building out, it's a way to get people to follow our Spotify channel. It incorporates culture, it's food, it's super interesting, and it's growing really nicely for us as another way to engage with folks. On the right-hand side, we've launched a new column recently called Women in Wine, which is a look. We have two female entrepreneurs who own wine shops in town, and they write a monthly column for us that's both sort of the intersection of business and entrepreneurship and female-owned businesses, as well as wine. So I apologize if anyone on this call is not supposed to be talking about wine, but it is. It's something that people love to share, and so that's been a really interesting and fun column for us as well, and something that we launched, and we look to we continue to grow it, and so it allows them to talk about their business and their challenges, but also to share wine suggestions. For 1 second, I just want to make sure I didn't skip a slide. Cool. Sorry about that. So one of the biggest challenges that we've had when I took over the business is, you can imagine a newspaper company is operating super old school, and you guys, you're not going to believe this when I tell it to you, but you can actually go look at our Instagram and you'll see. But when I took over the company, they hadn't posted on Instagram in over 5 years. It had been 5 years and a week since they had posted anything on Instagram. And I said, hey, what's the strategy? What's going on? And they said, well, we lost the password in 2016. So or 2015, because this was in December. So I got the password reset. At the time, we had about 600 followers on Atlanta in Town's Instagram. Now we have like 30, almost 3,500. And so you can imagine the shift in culture that, that happened when I came into the company, because, we had a company that was very, very focused on print media and wasn't really looking digital. It was looking at digital as just a distraction. And, to this day, print is still the most of our revenue, but we've got to really start focusing on how do we build this company to get to the future. So what did I do when I came in? So I want to talk a little bit about just the business challenges. And so, I spent the first few weeks really just listening and meeting with community leaders and meeting with clients. And the second half of the first month, sort of like getting people focused on us having an identity, continuing to evolve ourselves to be, award-winning journalists, but also to be, reframe us as a sort of like hyper-local media organization that's going to be across print and digital. So I wanted to really affirm those values to the organization. And so, leaning in, as I told you about the audio features on Spotify, the Women in Wine column, and looking at doing what I call meeting our audience where the audience is. And so, for us to connect with folks that are, of this generation that are in school now, that are coming up, you guys aren't reading newspapers, and no matter how much I try to force you to, like, that's not going to change. And so that's why we're doing things like launching the email first product. That's why we're doing things like integrating with Spotify. That's why we're doing things like having more diverse voices into our business, and so, or into our content. And these are just things that they weren't doing, and it wasn't anyone's fault. It was just an old school way of thinking, and they didn't have to change, and so, or they didn't choose to. And so we've been doing a lot of that. So now we're thinking much more like a startup, right? So now we're dispersed. We got rid of our office, mostly because no one was going there during COVID, but now we have, a much smaller office space where people can drop in and sort of share, and people work from home. One of the most radical things I did, and you'll get a chuckle. Some of us on this call will know what we're talking about, but the most radical move I made, I think, was we got rid of our fax number, and half the sales team was like, well, where are people going to fax our contracts to? And I had showed them how to use DocuSign, and I don't know, I can't over explain to you how complicated that was, but we've gotten through it. And the first month was really like what I call like the month of self-inflicted distractions. Teaching people how to use Google Docs, teaching people how to not how to scan something in from their phone. So all of those changes were really, really interesting. But we had to like come back to the focus. So that month of like total distractions as a business, was over on February 1st. And I told people, like, we're moving forward. And if you can't figure out how to use Google Docs, you can Google how to use Google Docs and you'll learn. And so they did. And it sounds crazy to those of us that, this is second nature to, but it was a hard part of coming into the newspaper business. And so got us back focused, and just really narrowly focused on providing local businesses. And I said this at the very beginning, with sensible marketing opportunities. There are a lot of places where advertisers can spend their marketing dollars, and we had to show them that that our hyper local newspapers were the smartest and the most efficient. And we continue to do that. So every month since I've been on board, sales have gone up just a little bit. And part of that is because, maybe I'm forcing people to do things a little bit more aggressively. Maybe we're talking differently about the business. Part of it, or more of it, quite frankly, is because the economy is coming back, and, businesses are reopening, and companies have a lot of pent up budgets that they haven't spent over the last year, and events are coming back, and restaurants are opening. So all of that helps us. But at the same time, there is undoubtedly a a glut of information. Like you guys get information from a million different places. And so, we have to prove to folks with every article that we write, and that's why this slide is staying up for so long, sorry, is that, we are providing them with sensible, non-sensational, reliable, accurate, and also like digestible content. So, a lot of people in this world don't know what to believe. And you see this every day, and you might even see it with your parents, and you might even see it with your friends, and you might even see it with your classmates from time to time, is that, the media has been vilified. The media has been, people have been made to not believe what they see in the media just because it's the media. And it's become a flashpoint in the, in the industry. But for us and for the communities that we serve, our communities have come to rely on our publications to know what's going on with their school board, to know about the latest real estate stuff, as I talked about, to find out where to get the best hamburger. Like these are all things that matter to people on the local and hyper local level. So what I keep telling the team is if we keep providing the right content and we keep providing advertisers, you see here some local, local advertisers with like, we provide them with better products from an advertising perspective, right? Better products than they can get elsewhere. Then it will become this sort of virtuous cycle of, of a relationship where the reader and the advertiser and the community and the school board and the politicians and our journalists, are working together in an ecosystem. So we will continue, and we do this. We are tough, and Renee, maybe you have this experience, like we're tough, but hopefully fair with the people we cover. We will support our local businesses where we can, but not, as Seema said, like not kowtow to, we're not writing just puff pieces on our advertisers, but we really encourage folks to support the local community. And I try to do that as much as I can, getting out, having our meetings at in the community, seeing people. I sit outside at cafes in Brookhaven and have papers on the table. And so people walk by and they see us, reading them. And so, that's really important to us, that we continue to, encourage, businesses, that we're there to be part of the local economy and keep, keep what I said earlier about keeping the dollars in the local community. So the dollars that advertisers spend go, come into my business, but then I use it to hire local journalists that are in the community, that live in the community, that cover the community, that work in the community. So it's very important to me. And I never knew that would be, a piece, but it is super important. And that's actually how Beth and I met, was at a Chamber of Commerce event. So we're active members in the Chamber of Commerce. And so I'll just close and happy to take as many questions as we have. But the first advertiser I brought in is this Dunwoody, one in the upper left-hand corner over here, is a friend of mine's clinic. It's a pain clinic in Dunwoody, and I brought it in, and they were just launching, and we're a perfect fit for them. They're in Dunwoody Village. It was, very local. They're members of the community, so you can see their faces. And like the paper came out, and I got a text from him, and it was the first day, and he said, "Hey, someone came in with the ad. New customer came with the ad." And I was, I was like, of course they did. And then an hour later, he texted me again, and he's like, "Someone else came in with the ad." And then it struck me like, what, this works. And so it was a great proof point to know. And that's why we have Town Brookhaven and Nothing Bundt Cakes and the same, people renew month after month. So local, really made me believe, in the power of local and hyper local media. But as you saw earlier in the presentation, as you probably know, it's kind of, there's a lot of easier ways to get rich than going into the newspaper business in 2020. In fact, there was recently an article in the New York Times about, they say the best way to become a millionaire is to be a billionaire and buy a newspaper. None of those dynamics apply to me. But, what I do know is that, it's a very, very tricky time to be in this business. But as I keep telling the team, if we just provide a quality content and we do it in a sustainable way in terms of just the business that we run, so controlling cost and being responsible. We deliver content to people, the content they want. So we talked about, real estate, food, culture, the content they need, public safety, education, local government. Then we'll continue to build this, a sustainable company. And that company doesn't have to be massive, but it certainly, as I found out in my first 5 months of doing this, can be very, very meaningful. And to me, that's what's making it a ton of fun. So that is sort of where I'll stop, and happy to take questions, or if anyone wants to confirm that I'm crazy, they can do that as well. But yeah, thanks for listening. Yeah.
We have 2 questions.
Yeah, sure.
All right. So the first question is from That Plains Walking Guy. Don't know the first name yet. I'm hoping to find out. And this person, oh, wait, let's find out. Oh, no, we've got a third question. Okay. Do you think that the internet will be the permanent end of ink and paper newspapers for local communities in the future?
So I think it will be the end of daily metropolitan newspapers. But I do not think it will be the end of community newspapers. And I'll tell you why. Because, so I would much rather be my company than be the AJC right now. And the reason is because the AJC owns printing presses, they own trucks, they have delivery people, they have people that have to work the printing press. So the economics for daily newspapers, they have to cover a very wide swath of the state. And that makes it really hard to do on a daily print piece, publication. For us, I don't own the printing presses. I can scale up or scale down the amount I print every month. I don't have to have people to work the printing press. I don't have to have a lot of the stuff that goes into that, so the economics for us are much, much better. So I think the daily paper will not be printing probably in 12 to 18 months, but I think the monthly, or weekly community paper will be.
Okay, that was a question from Skylar Moore, by the way. The next question is from Joanna Vasquez, and she asks, do you see printed newspapers as a part of the future of society, or do you think they will eventually no longer be printed? Which is akin to the prior one, but it's more specific about the future of the actual print version of it.
Yeah, I think it's the same. I think we'll continue to have a print paper because it's for hyperlocal advertisers, if everyone goes digital, and you can see this already with the prices of Google and AdWords and Facebook and Instagram, actually the economics don't work for local advertisers. And so they have to have a way to cut through and be able to control. And so I think that the community newspaper, whether it's weekly or monthly, gives them an avenue, and especially the way we distribute into homes through the mail, that there will continue to be a printed product. And I may be I'm not an unbiased party in this, so I may be, I just may be making myself feel better by saying it, but I still believe that there will be a need for community weekly or monthly papers. The same thing stands for, about what I said about the dailies. And this is not, by the way, this is not breaking news, no pun intended, me saying that. I mean, the CEO of the New York Times says the same thing about their printed paper. It's just the utility of a big metropolitan daily paper has been taken over by the internet, but there still seems to be the economics and the need for it on the community level, weekly or monthly.
Great. Okay, and another question is from Michelle, and she asked, just like having a newspaper report a future project makes people consider the ethics of it, do you think it also encourages or incentivizes people to see those projects see those projects through once people know about it? Like, is there pressure to keep going with a project since it's been publicized?
For me or for who? Sorry, I don't know if I caught the first
I'll let
part.
Michelle ask the question herself.
I remember you said that when you like asked a question and it was like, if people know about a project that you want to do, if a newspaper reports about it, would I still want to do it or something? And you said that it makes people, that once people know about a project that you want to take on, it makes you consider the ethics of it more so. So I was wondering if in the same way it also pushes someone to want to actually go through with the project since people already knew about it.
So it's sort of like keeping yourself accountable or keeping a government accountable. I mean, they say, there's a saying about newspapers or journalism being the rough draft of history. So this is kind of the, play on how we came up with the rough draft name for our email. So if journalism is a rough draft of history, or the first draft of history, do people hold themselves accountable? I don't know. I mean, the city councilman from Sandy Springs seemed to think so. I think that's, probably equally a question for, for our leaders than, as much as for me to answer. I think we've all seen, again, without wading into politics, that, people change. People seem to be malleable on their ethics or, follow through on a lot of topics. So it's a good question. I wish I had a better answer for it. What do you think, Michelle?
I would think personally, if I said I wanted to do something and a newspaper reported about it, I would feel kind of pressured to actually do it because I feel like people are watching and actually want to, see the outcome.
Yeah, I would think so too. I'm not sure that everyone, especially in some of our public officials these days, have the same sort of feelings. But again, those are my personal opinions creeping in.
Another question is from Kirsten, and she asked, do you think that advertisers will eventually stop wanting to be in the daily newspapers if people believe they will stop printing in 12 to 18 months?
No, I mean, it's very transparent sort of how many papers are printed and distributed today. So you saw our circulation numbers. And so advertisers know that, we print 100,000 copies a month. They see the numbers for each community. We don't, misrepresent those. We don't try to, tell them otherwise. We also sell digitally. We also sell email sponsorships. So there's a lot of different ways. A lot of the advertising in daily newspapers these days, if you flip through, any daily newspaper, if you're in Atlanta or if you're in another community, a lot of the ads, unfortunately are this goes back to the sort of the scary pieces of the industry, are what's called direct response advertising. So they're basically, the papers only get paid if people respond to those ads. So there may be an ad for, I don't know, gutter repair or some sort of home services, and there'll be a number, a phone number in there, and that phone number will be different for every newspaper that they advertise in, so they can track, how those ads are doing, and then the paper will only get paid if people call those numbers. We've stayed away from that model. It's not a good one for us, being a monthly, but and we our distribution is smaller than some of the daily newspapers. So that, the AJC, I don't know what their numbers are now, but it's, I don't think that would really impact.
Okay, does anybody else have any other questions?
I would say also, Kirsten, that probably me saying 12 to 18 months, I think most people you would ask would maybe think sooner, or like we saw, there's over 2,000 papers that have already start publishing. So I don't think that that's real, that hopefully isn't, I don't want that to be a takeaway from the talk, because I do think, and I really, people ask me all the time about other community papers in Atlanta, and I want them all to do well, because I want you guys to be consumers of news. I want you guys to care about what's happening in your community. I want y'all to read, our website, our emails, etc. Because it's, I need a healthy ecosystem. I don't need that dynamic where everyone's just talking about newspapers failing, because that's not good for anyone.
Hey, one more question, and then Dr. Shrikande would like to make a comment. Joanna wants to know if you're nervous about being part of the newspaper world, and the email for the newsletter is there on the screen already, Joanna. It's roughdraftatlanta.com, but she wants to know if you're nervous.
No, I mean, no. I mean, if I spend too much time, well, here's my answer. I'm having way too much fun right now. So, in the past, 3 months, I've gone to lunch with the mayor of Brookhaven. I've gone on Zoom with the mayor of Dunwoody. I've had people recognize me, on the Beltline from the AJC story. So I'm having way too much fun to be nervous. If I stop, when I was preparing this presentation and I started flipping through that book and I started reading the stats, then I get a little panicked. But I think what's really cool about it is, and Beth falls in, all of you guys fall into this category, is everyone's been super supportive. So whether it was the city of Brookhaven, whether it's big companies like, Jamestown, who owns Ponce City Market, the town Brookhaven people, the CEO of Cox, so the CEO of the AJC reached out. So everyone wants us to do well. Everyone wants us to succeed. So no, I don't know if it's hubris or if it's naivete. One of the things I said to the team when I started was I've got a lot of energy, a little bit of capital, and a healthy dose of naivete. So I know if I stop to think too long and read the stats, then a little bit, but for the most part, did I lose you?
I did that so that we could see you.
Sorry. For the most part, no, I don't feel nervous. I mean, it's a good, it's crazy, but it's, without giving too many details, the business is profitable. I mean, we've been able to, to run it in a way that's, it's, again, we're not massive. There's a lot of easier ways to get rich, but it's really sustainable and fun, and we're paying people, and we've got a good little business going. So knock on wood, I'm not too nervous, which is weird because I tend to be a nervous person and I don't take a lot of risks. So.
And Dr. Shrikande has a comment she'd like to make.
Yeah, I just want to say we just finished talking about newspapers in my class, and most of the students here are from my class on intro to media. And I had them read an article about news deserts and local newspapers struggling. So your talk was very sort of matched very well with what we're doing. So I just wanted to thank you for, making time for us, and to my students for asking great questions.
Oh, thank you. I mean, thanks for having me. I mean, I wish we could be doing this in person, and I really appreciate everyone's interest, and thank you.
Well, that concludes the event tonight. Thank you so much for coming and speaking with students. Dr. Shrikande, thanks for encouraging your students to come. And if you have any questions, Keith put his information on the screen, but if you don't mind putting it in the chat as well, you can contact him. And I've recorded this, so if you, I'll share it with Dr. Shrikande, and she can share it with other students if she's interested. Other than that, we really appreciate you. Keith, I'll take you to lunch and give you some Oglethorpe swag as a thank you for presenting today.
Wow, I will not say no to that.
Fantastic. All right, it was good to see all of you.
By the way, I'm so impressed with Oglethorpe, and having grown up there and not knowing as much about it, just meeting Beth and now being in the community in Brookhaven more and more, you guys are doing super cool stuff. And I told the mayor, Brookhaven or Oglethorpe's the coolest thing about Brookhaven, one of the coolest things. So I think it's great. So
Fantastic. Well, we look forward to a deeper, better connection with you and the Reporter newspapers and Springs Publishing as a whole. But thank you again for tonight. Goodbye, everybody. Nice to see you. Thanks for coming.
And
All right,
thanks,
thanks
Beth,
all.
for
Thank you.
organizing this.
Thank you. You're welcome. Bye.